Tires, rims. The black rubber, or sometimes they have a dash of white in the middle, and they go around this metal thing that's attached to your car, and it lets your car roll on the ground, and sometimes they go I know at the end of the day all you want to do is just burn those tires up into the hugest cloud of smoke, or shred your tires while hanging your car completely sideways, pulling the sickest drift moves ever. But at the end of the day, what do all these different upgrades do to your car? Do they just make it faster and give you better cornering performance? Or are you wasting your time and just throwing on the supposed best tire and wasting a bunch of PI for your build? In this video, I'm going to explain how changes to all these components can affect the build of your car, and there is some surprising info that I've discovered while doing my experiments, so stick around to find out. You might just learn something. Hello and welcome back everybody to part 3 of my complete guide to Forza Horizon 5. Firstly, I have to apologize to all of you who have been following the series, and if you were waiting for this part of the guide to come out. I came down with the flu recently and other bits of life came up, but I'm back, baby. Now if you're here and you haven't watched the other parts already, I will be putting up a link to part 2 that will pop up at the top of your screen right about now. Links to part 1 and 2 will also be found down in the description, so you can go watch those videos. Go on, but make sure you come back when you're done watching them. Also, if you have been enjoying the series so far, go ahead and smash that like button. And if you are new to the channel, I would like to give you a huge welcome. You should subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date with my Forza Horizon 5 content, and also because there is a lot more to come in the series. Now then, this video is going to be a bit different because firstly, this is going to be one of those videos that are more technical with some numbers, so put on your thinking caps. And now that those thinking caps are on, I want to ask each and every one of you a question. How do you decide what tire compounds to use? Do you base it on the class that you're doing a build for? Do you pick your tire compound based on the purpose of your build? Or are you somebody who just leaves tires for last because you want all the speed and power in the world and you just check back if you've got enough PI for tires? Let me know in the comment section down below. So first up, we obviously have tire compounds to take a look at. There are at most 12 tire compound upgrade options that you will find for your car. I say at most because certain cars already come with better tire compounds as stock, and because these are all upgrades, there isn't really a downgrade option, and this links back to Forza Horizon 5's PI and class system. The Vol 05RR is the perfect example for this because this car comes with full racing slicks already, and you will not find street, sport or semi-slick tires as an upgrade option to install on this car. So to begin breaking down tire compounds, I'm going to throw up on screen a sort of guideline that I use for doing my builds, and this is based on the class and kind of racing that I'm going to do with the car. You can pause the video here to get a good look at everything. Now these tire compound upgrades exist because with each next class you push your car into, you are definitely reaching higher speeds, and you need your tires to cope with these speeds, and each next level of tire compound has better heat management. Yes, you now have to manage the heat in your tires in Forza Horizon 5, and with this you need to set the correct pressures in order to maintain the right heat at any given time during a race, and there are a number of factors that can affect this. The next thing I was going to throw up on screen was a breakdown of what tire temperatures to expect based on what compound you have, but after some homework I found out that I would actually need to test each tire compound on every car in Forza Horizon 5, and that would be way too tedious for me to do at this point. This is because I found that each tire compound reacts differently based on the car that I am using. I tested tire compounds with the R34 GTR and the old Mustang GT that you will see in a short bit with the crowd control sticker on the back, and what I found was that the tires didn't need to be at the exact same temperatures to be at the right heat level. So instead of putting up a table, I am going to tell each of you to check where your tires are heating up and what kind of temperatures you need to get them to heat up to in order to get the right temperature. Other than the tires just heating up, you also have to make sure that they can stay hot instead of cooling down straight away or overheating. There is a chapter that you will see where you can find how to view tire temperatures in this video. It's towards the end, but you should stick around here for now. Now you need to bear in mind that tire temperatures will increase under certain conditions, and these conditions are firstly at launch, especially for front wheel and rear wheel drive cars. For all wheel drive cars though, the tires may not heat up fully because the torque is split between all the wheels, and that will help balance the load. The next condition is braking, and this is also depending on where you've chosen to shift your braking balance and how much braking power you want, and also what speed you're braking from. The higher the speed, the longer the braking time, and therefore your tire temps are going to rise much higher. Another condition, which is the one that will really stress your tires, especially where your build has been balanced out properly, is cornering. The more corners a track has, and also depending on the length and sharpness of these corners as well as the speed you can carry around them, the higher your temps will go. The last and worst situation where your tire temps will increase is during over or understeer. The worst of these two situations is oversteer, because if you cannot bring the rear end of the car back in line quick enough with throttle control and steering input, the tires will continue to heat up and you will ultimately lose control of the car. Now some interesting things to note about a few of these tire compounds. Drag tires are not the kind of tires I would recommend for road racing because of the massive understeer characteristics from it, but it is still sometimes usable in B-class road or street racing. If you can manage that, good for you. I personally cannot, and I don't want to either. Another very interesting compound is drift tires. After some experimenting, I found that this tire is a good option that fits between sport and semi-slick tires, but this is only the case with all-wheel drive builds in A-class road racing. The same can be said for rally tires. This is because these two compounds can actually hold their heat levels pretty well and can maintain max grip for longer as long as the car itself doesn't have any over or understeer behavior. The next tire compound that was surprising is snow tires. All of you may already know this, but for those who don't, this tire actually does work best for drifting simply because it can hold slides longer than actual drift tires. Then we have off-road tires, and these seem to be the best option for any off-road type build, whether it's for cross-country or mixed surface, simply because these tires can cope with various terrains. This is especially beneficial because it doesn't use up as much PI as rally tires. The last tire compound I will mention is vintage race tires. These tires can be found on a lot of the older cars, and they actually work really well with them. You can even keep these cars in rear wheel drive format, and as long as you stay within B class, these tires work very well. You can sometimes use them in A class, but they do tend to suffer in high speed corners when you go to speeds above 280 kph, and they will have some understeer characteristics at this point. The best part about this tire though is the way they heat up and how the heat is spread. These tires don't take long at all to heat up, and they can actually maintain good heat levels and max grip for a long time. But like I said, you may run into an understeer situation and you just have to slow down a bit and use throttle control to get through the corner. Now let's move on to increasing your tire width. This is something you should change depending on the following: the class you're building for, power and torque, the tire compound you have installed, the drivetrain and weight of the car, but more importantly, the weight distribution. You see, these factors will need to be taken into consideration altogether because it all needs to work as one unit. The higher up you go with the class of your build, the more necessary it becomes to increase tire width based on your drivetrain, how light the car is, and how the weight of the car is distributed. To see a car's weight distribution, you can find it in the stats by pressing toggle, which is whatever button this is for you, way down over here, and then you look here. This will only show you the percentage of the weight distributed at the front, so obviously if you were to work out the rear weight distribution, just minus 100 against this figure. It is also something that you will need to have judgment for, and also don't forget to test drive. I will never stop reminding you about this because it really helps out. Another thing I'm going to mention before I start talking about a few examples is you need to keep in mind that increasing tire width will affect the way your tires are making contact with the ground. And this is just one of the many things that will affect this, and this is a key factor in having good handling from your build. Now let me explain a few examples to you. So let's say you were running a B-class front wheel drive car that has street tires installed. I would not increase the front tire width because it simply isn't worth it to use the PI when you could use it for power upgrades. Another thing is that the front wheel drive cars we have in Forza Horizon 5 are decently lightweight, falling around or mostly below 1500 kilograms. With the exception of a small handful, I would recommend that you increase rear tire width because of this, due to the weight of a front wheel drive car being more at the front. This may reduce PI, but it will be beneficial for keeping the rear of the car in check because the rear is lighter than the front, and bigger tires at the back mean more grip at the back. It may also be beneficial for some of the front wheel drive cars that have lift-off oversteer tendencies. So when you're going around corners and trying to maintain speed with throttle control and you happen to come off the throttle a bit too much, this may reduce the chances of oversteer occurring.
You have arrived at your destination. Arrived at your destination.
Now let's switch it up a bit and say you were running an A-class rear wheel drive build that has decent power and you installed sport tires. The situation would be much the same as the previous example I mentioned, where you should increase the rear tire width, and because you will have more tire, so to speak, at the back on the driving wheels, the chances of the car breaking traction and going into an oversteer situation are lower, much like the example I mentioned about the front wheel drive car, but this time the chances of this occurring will be because you are on the throttle, not coming off the throttle.
Arrived at your destination.
But what about all-wheel drive builds? These builds can be a little bit tricky for me. Firstly, my method for choosing tires for an all-wheel drive build is based on the class I'm in as per the table I showed earlier in the video, and my decision for increasing tire width, I always prefer to increase rear tire width because I want to send more torque to the rear wheels when balancing the differential, because I want to eliminate understeer while not allowing the car to have too much oversteer from the increased rear tire width, thus making it stable in corners. My advice to everyone for any kind of build is to choose based on whether you want over or understeer. If you want more oversteer, leave the rear tire width alone. If you want more stability, then increase rear tire width. Now if I were to go into the higher classes like S1 and above, and I notice some understeer tendencies, even though I adjusted the diff to my liking, I already increased rear tire width to cope with oversteer and make the car more stable, but now I'm getting understeer. I would then increase the front tire width bit by bit to give the front a greater contact patch and maintain better grip levels at the higher speeds that can be experienced in S1 and above. Remember that tire heat is affected by this as well, and a bigger tire can either make the car better or worse depending on how the tire makes contact with the road. The better situation would be where the tire width was increased, and this would lead to the tire heat being spread out more, and the worst situation would be where the tire cannot generate enough heat to spread out across the tire. Another reason to increase front tire width from S1 and above is because of the higher speeds you go up to. The higher the speed, the more G-force the car generates, and the tires are first in line to take this force. Now at these higher speeds, if the tire cannot take it, it will sort of bend inward, and this is what you want to avoid by increasing front tire width. I know there is a way to adjust this in tuning, but I'm not going to dive into that now. Just trust me, if you notice your S1 build has some understeer, then increase front tire width, and it doesn't have to be all the way either. You may need to sacrifice something for this, but it all links back to how racing in Forza Horizon 5 works, and that's another thing I'm not going to dive into just yet. Now I've been talking about tire heat a lot in this video, but some of you may not know how to view this. To view tire heat, you first need to bring up telemetry. You can do this by pressing T on keyboard, which is the default button if you're on PC, or if you're on console or using a controller, you may need to switch your Ana button to be for telemetry. Once you brought up the telemetry readouts, scroll over to tires heat, and you can see how the heat is spread from the inside going out. A perfect situation would be where your tire is hottest on the inside, going colder to the outside. Also in the screen you will see some different colors. The different colors you will see are blue, meaning that the tires are cold; clear, which would mean that the tires are heating up; yellow, which would mean that the tires are at the right temperature; and red, you guessed it, this is where the tires are overheating, and you may have problems at this point. Unless you're drifting, then don't worry about it and let it hang, bro. There isn't a formula that I can give you for tire width. You will have to use your judgment like I said earlier, and you may need to revisit how you build the car in order to find the right combination of parts to be within your target PI, and then the right settings after that still. Sometimes this can take a lot of time, but it is rewarding in the end when you get the perfect recipe. And I'm not talking about making Uncle Roger's egg fried rice here. Now we move on to wheels and wheel sizes. Changing the wheels isn't the highest priority on my list simply because of the actual goal I have with changing wheels. Let's say I was doing a build for an A-class road racer, and that would mean that I am allowed to go up to 800 PI, but because I wanted that one last power upgrade, my car ended up at 801 or even 802 PI. This is where I would come to change the wheels, and based on what car it is, because some cars actually have lighter wheels than others, I am sometimes able to bring the car back down to 800 PI just because I added some weight to the car, and I'm happy to go with that because sometimes I just need that extra power in my build. The next thing is wheel sizes, and this is another thing that affects tire heat because the bigger the wheel, the better the contact, and the better the contact, the more heat. It may not seem like it's a big thing, but think about it. If your wheels are bigger, you have a smaller sidewall, and you will need to increase tire pressure in order for the tire to maintain its shape. The other thing is that because there is less room for the pressure in the tire to spread around, the heat will increase faster, and this isn't a bad thing because you should have set the tire pressure higher already to compensate for the smaller sidewall, and this will help you keep your tire heat in check. My recommendation for increasing your wheel size is based on what surface you are building the car for. If you want to do a road or street racing build, then I would recommend you increase your wheel size, except if you are planning to run the car through some tighter corners, then you may want to go slightly smaller, but an increased size nevertheless. For off-road builds, I would recommend keeping the wheels at their standard size. The reason for this is because of the friction between the two different surfaces. Asphalt has more friction and will stress the tire more, generating more heat, but you want this heat so that the tire can maintain max grip. Off-road surfaces are loose, so you need to get used to driving on these surfaces. As I mentioned in part 1, you should use more oversteer when driving on these surfaces, and by oversteer I do not mean drifting. When running the car on these loose surfaces with an oversteer driving style, you will be putting a lot of strain on the sidewall, and you want to have lower tire pressures so that your tires can grab the off-road surface. So higher tire pressures won't help here. The smallest wheel is what will help your tire stay in good shape because you will have more sidewall to cope with what you're putting the tire through. Now finally, I shall discuss something that really should have been part of the tuning, because these upgrades actually make a difference to the car's characteristics in terms of over and understeer, and I never saw it until I started experimenting a few months ago. I am talking about increasing your track width. This may seem like simply making your tires stick out wider than the wheel arches of your car, but it actually has an effect on the car. And when I say I want to have full control of it, I don't mean I want to go 3 clicks up. This should have been part of the tuning menu, and you will agree with me right after I say this. You will be able to fine-tune the overall stability of the car as well as the understeer and oversteer characteristics, and it may be what can save you a lot of headache with any build, be it for rear wheel drive, front wheel drive, and even all wheel drive. Let's say that you have the standard track width on the car all around, and with all your tuning you still run into some issues with the handling. If you run into some oversteer, increasing the rear track width would help resolve this issue, because you are actually changing how much effort would be needed for the tail of the car to kick out. What if you had understeer then? You would need to increase the front track width, and this would help because less effort would be needed up front for the car to turn in. When I speak about effort, in this case I'm referring to how the load of the car shifts from side to side. A wider track width will mean that the load will shift less, but you do still need it to shift. And that brings me to my next point. How do you judge how much you should increase track width by? The answer is simple. For road builds, increase the track width according to what you want to compensate for according to the width of the car. What I mean by this is increase track width to the point where your tire sits flush with the body of the car, or even just a little bit of sidewall sticking out. What this will actually do is allow the car to only shift weight to the point where the body ends, and you will be getting a good amount of force going down to the outer edges of your outside tires in any corner. For off-road builds, you can max out all the way because you want to allow the car to destabilize just a bit. Earlier I said that I mentioned in part 1 that you should get the car to have more oversteer so that you can slide through these corners. Having max track width will help the car stay stable with this driving style. The ultimate goal with track width though is to have the right amount of agility, and your track width can change this in a big way, and that is why I say this should have been part of tuning rather than upgrades. It could have been super beneficial if we can really dial in just how much track width we want, all the way down to the last millimeter. And with track width being the last of the upgrade options under wheels and tires, that means that it is time to start rounding off this video. But before I disappear off your screens, I want to give all of you one major helpful tip. Remember the guideline of what tire compound to use per class and discipline earlier? Don't take that as gospel for all your builds. After you've driven the car, done your tuning, did a couple of races and so on, if the car feels really good at cornering, check your tire heat and see where it tops out, and if you get any signs of overheating, even the little ones. If you do see any signs of overheating, then you don't need to do what I'm about to tell you because your build is at a limit, but you should stick around for this, because if you do not see any signs of overheating, then you need to go back to your tire compound upgrades, and I want you to click toggle. Everybody remember how to do that? I told you earlier in the video. If you are on anything above street tires, I want you to toggle over to where you can find lateral Gs and look at the difference for the lower options. If the difference is minimal like 0,1, then you should consider using that tire, but keep at least more than 1 G for anything A-class and above. Sometimes you may even come across a car that will generate the same amount of G-force for the better and the worse tire. If you see things like this, then you should definitely be grabbing the lower spec tire compound, and you can really begin to balance out your build way better because you will be able to put even more PI into the other parts, like the really juicy power parts that you're always chasing. Now this is experimental still, so to know if this works, go drive around in it and keep an eye on the heat of your tires. If you don't see any excessive heat issues, or you manage to tune it out by adjusting your tire pressure, and the car continues to perform well around corners, well done, you may have just found the best tire for your build. The thing about this kind of build is it is more PI efficient, and we all know that PI is something that we always have to take into account. And unfortunately, this is actually the end. I hope all of you enjoyed it, and as always, I hope that it helps you in whatever journey you've chosen in Forza Horizon 5. Feel free to comment down below with any questions if you need help with the build, or even a suggestion that may help other players. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like, and again, all you new viewers, subscribe with turning on notifications so you can stay up to date with the series and any other of my content related to Forza Horizon 5 as soon as the videos come out. With all the above said, in the next video I was going to discuss platform and handling upgrades, but I feel that it would be better to go through gearbox and differential upgrades along with aero upgrades. These are two small sections of upgrades to most cars in Forza Horizon 5, and I will join them in one video. And I want to do these first because these are important choices in any build. I will specifically be discussing which gearbox is best for you. Should you upgrade your clutch? Does a lighter drive shaft actually make a difference? Do you need a differential upgrade? And are aero parts really necessary? Well, that's for the next video. But for now, this is goodbye, and it's not going to be for long. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, drive fast, stay sharp, and until the next video, this is Chini signing off. Okay, bye!